The Bible tells us that money is the root of all evil. And I'm here to tell you that that is a crock of shit. Money is a tool, and your shitty relationship with it is premeditated and designed and upheld by people that are not us. People not like you and I. But I'm not here to talk about money today. It's dawned on me lately that the true root of all evil is attachment. Yup, attachment. It is. Attachment in all forms, because attachment keeps us from growing and moving forward and learning and accepting new things and acknowledging reality around us. But the absolute most detrimental thing that we all are inherently attached to some degree is our egoic minds. I could say that you are egoic as fuck, and you would probably disagree with me, because the stereotypical version of ego that we think of is maybe this macho guy or the super arrogant person, super confident, they're not going to let anyone touch them, who feels like they're unfuckwittable. And to some extent, that is a form of ego. We each have different purposes on this planet, but one thing that we all have in common is that we are all here to elevate our soul through this earth experience. We all are here on a specific mission, but more importantly, we're here to learn specific lessons so that we can elevate. Do you know what the main obstacle is of us learning these lessons? Ourselves, aka our egos. It is a continuous back and forth of our pure conscious minds and our earthly subconscious trying to see which one can get the most autonomy of our reality. Our earthly subconscious minds cannot prosper unless they have an identity to cling onto, unless they have an ego to be attached to. On the spectrum of emotions, the best, most optimal emotion, of course, and feeling is love. On the complete other side of that is fear. Your subconscious earthly mind is fearful as fuck. Our subconscious mind is so fearful, so afraid of an ego death, that even if we are in terrible, awful situations, or even if we are perpetuating awful behavior, even if we are pushing cycles further or generational trauma forward that we know needs to come to an end, that this is why a lot of people don't do it, and a lot of people get stuck and they just circle the drain. From up to 6 months in utero to age 7, our brains are like sponges, clinging on for anything that they can identify with. And it is completely, one of the hardest things in the world to disassemble everything that you've learned. So if you saw toxicity from your parents, if you saw men treat women a certain way, if you saw certain people be sad and never be able to let go of that sadness, if you saw people be desperate for money and just want to be selfish as fuck, you internalize that and you're not doing the work to disassemble that and to unlearn that, then the ego has got you. Your ego can be sad. Your ego can be paranoid. Your ego can be greedy. Your ego can be overconfident. Your ego can be anything, quite literally anything negative that you can't shed, that you can't let go, or that you can't even see. That is your ego. This is the best example I can think of off the cuff. Think about the right, the conservative. You know what I'm saying? Don't give a fuck about women's rights. Don't give a fuck about people of color. Don't give a fuck about ICE. Don't give a fuck about classism. I could go on and on, but the point is, a lot of these conservatives were brought up, with that shit banged into their fucking head. You know what I mean? So if they have to unattach themselves from these ideologies and the identity that a MAGA person has built for themselves, that would mean that they would have to admit that something is true, which is also the opposite of fear. And if they have to admit that one thing is true, they have to admit that other things are true, which they are scared to death to do. That would shatter their entire identity, their entire world. This video is not about the right versus the left, but the point is, take an average MAGA person who all they knew and all they were surrounded by were these ideologies that they became attached to, that became their identity, and now it's their ego. So you still think money is the root of all evil? That's what people with money want you to think. They want you to think it's evil, because how can you, a normal person, attract an abundance of something that you in the back of your mind think is evil? How are you supposed to hold on to that, or spend it, or give it, or see it, or even dictate how it should be dispersed if it's something that you think is evil? You can't regulate that. I don't remember what the fuck I was doing the other day, but I wrote down what I think is the most profound thought I have ever conceived. I said, does history repeat itself just because? Or is it due to the ego of the collective consciousness. Because yes, we each have our individual egos, but we still are operating on this plane together and collectively have a collective consciousness. That's why I believe it's so hard to perpetuate real change, to conceive real change, because we've always treated women like that. We've always gone to war, send the troops, do the draft. You know, we've always had slaves. We've always treated people of color like that. We are attached to these mindsets. And so history repeats itself. I don't know if I would ever have kids, but if I did, they would almost be like a social experiment. I would absolutely guide them the best that I can and give them the best tools that I can in every sense. But I would constantly be asking, what do you think? Intrinsically, look inside yourself. What does this situation make you feel like? Without all the bullshit that is surrounding, what do you really think? What do you really want? And for us, what do we have to unattach ourselves to get there? It's always, oh, I want to change. I want to change. How can you really have real change if you are still severely tethered to the attachment that is the opposite of the reality that you say that you're manifesting so badly? Oh, but you hope for a change. I've kind of nixed the word hope from my vocabulary, period. I kind of had this weird fucking feeling about the word hope not too long ago. And so I wanted to look up the Latin definition of where it derives from, because you know the Latin definition is never going to lie to you. They're talking about hope, space in Latin, expectation, expectance, expectancy, anticipation, apprehension. None of these are good words. I've kind of started replacing the word hope with optimism. Because if you are being optimistic, you are operating from a place that is not attached to anything. Hope is baseless and requires no work and no accountability. I watched this video where spiritualist Erin Lyons, who I love you Erin Lyons, she gave some tips and some steps to manifesting, and the final one was, detachment. Of course, it's a huge thing to manifest anything, is you have to be detached. But I'm going to add another layer onto that and say that you need to have a level of optimism. Because if you are not going into your manifestation with a certain level of optimism, that means that subconsciously you are still attached to an outcome or a way that you want your manifestation to come to fruition. And that's not how it works. Hey y'all, final thing. I realized I proposed a lot of the issue here, and believe it or not, I am very solution-based oriented. If you do want me to do a video about how to detach, from the ego successfully, because it is possible and it's a lot easier than you think, I can definitely do a video on that as well. I would never, propose a problem without offering a solution.